So there's a case that really grabs your attention. It's the Maya Mallette case where independent investigation, uncovers layers of messy truth about a disappearance.
Yep. Right, right. It's crazy how, from the very start, things like suspicious timing and even the husband's failure to report just add fuel to the fire, huh?
Exactly. It's like almost everything seems off. Maya's disappearance was paired with a host of red flags. The husband didn't report anything, which is obviously a huge red flag. And then there are questions about how the digital evidence, photos, location data, starts painting a rather intriguing picture.
And the case seems almost emblematic of how independent queries cut through all the official boundaries, right?
Absolutely. And it gets even more interesting when you look at how evidence was, well, assembled outside traditional channels. There's that whole aspect of digital footprints, evidence chain, and even witness testimony that later gets, entangled with official procedures.
Yeah, I was struck by how the investigative gap really underlines resource limitations and procedural constraints. It seems that the authorities sometimes stall official investigations, and independent methods step in to fill that void.
Right. And that's where Billy Little enters the stage. His background in the U.S. Navy and unorthodox approach to independent inquiry really shakes up the entire investigation process.
hmm Billy Little's involvement is almost like a breath of fresh air, especially in a case where institutional trust was significantly lacking. But here's a question. Isn't it risky to rely on evidence collected by civilians?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, when you're building a case with evidence that might not be admissible in court, you're really walking a tightrope. And the case even highlights legal complications like evidence chain of custody and witness
Right,
contamination.
exactly. And that table outlining the legal challenges really drives home how material discovered outside official channels might be seen as inadmissible. But still, these independent methods bring forward a lot that might otherwise be overlooked.
Absolutely. You have like community engagement, digital forensics, and even consumer DNA testing and location data, all adding up to this mosaic of investigative methods. It's like each piece of evidence contributes to the overall picture in a way that traditional systems might miss.
hmm And it's fascinating how the case underscores the notion of technological democratization in investigations. Ordinary citizens, armed with smartphones and a bit of know how, are now pivotal players.
Yes, yes, exactly. And it's almost like a double edged sword. On one hand, you get these fresh perspectives from independent experts like Billy Little. On the other, you run into concerns over due process, privacy, and even misinformation risks.
Right? And that ethical balancing act really is intense. People are pressured by public distrust. I mean, when the official investigation stalls, community members start crowdsourcing and building their own narratives.
And that public pressure, can really amplify the investigation. Social media campaigns and community searches, for instance, not only mobilize crowds to find clues, but also push the narrative forward, sometimes even before a complete official inquiry.
And that's where things get a bit problematic, in my opinion. While public engagement is great, it also risks, prejudicing the case and affecting jury selection if you ever get to trial. What do you think?
It's a fair critique. Public pressure can sometimes operate like a double-edged sword. It pushes for transparency, yet might compromise the fairness of the legal process. Authorities are especially concerned about media narratives preempting official facts.
Exactly. And speaking of narratives, the case really shows the power of media utilization, right? Digital evidence, photos, and even crowdsourced info all contribute to a puzzle that seems to almost outpace traditional law enforcement methods.
For sure, it's like the investigation creates a sort of convergence where independent efforts finally meet official investigation. And sometimes the independent voice ends up shining a light on things that might have otherwise remained buried.
hmm And that convergence can lead to a ripple effect, affecting the victim's family, the community, even the investigators. It's a big, multifaceted impact.
Exactly. And, it's not just about uncovering evidence, it's also about rebuilding institutional trust, something that clearly failed the community in Maya Mallette's case. People turned to independent avenues because they believed that the official channels couldn't get to the truth fast enough.
Yeah, the distrust is staggering. Those public figures and communities felt that there was an immense information gap and that amateurs were outpacing professionals in many instances.
And it's interesting how a statistic pops up, like the 67% public distrust versus the 41% information gap, which essentially reflect how public sentiment and investigative efficacy interplay. It's like um, independent cases become a sort of beacon for necessary change in standard procedures.
Definitely. I mean, it's like you have these independent investigators using unconventional tools, from digital forensics to community building, to bridge a gap the institutions left behind.
Exactly. It's like using all the modern tech, but also relying on good old detective work. And speaking of tech, the case really delves into consumer DNA testing and location data to piece together Maya's movements, which is quite cutting edge.
Yep, and that digital evidence aspect with GPS data, security footage, and even social media amplification shows just how pervasive technology is in modern investigations.
Right. And in the swirling chaos of digital info, there's always this challenge of establishing a clean evidence chain. This forensic puzzle is further muddled by improper witness interviews, causing contamination issues in court.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us to the legal complications. The table that outlines challenges like search legality, witness contamination, and media prejudice really sums up how jeopardized the entire legal process might become once independent evidence is on the table.
Exactly. And it's not just a technicality, it's a systemic challenge. The integrity of evidence is paramount. And when independent investigators step in, the procedures sometimes aren't aligned with established legal protocols.
Right. And even though independent investigators like Billy Little bring fresh perspectives, the overall process must answer to due process concerns, which really is a big ethical question here.
hmm It's a real balancing act between the right to pursue truth and the necessity to follow rules. And this case, with its tangled narratives and community involvement, highlights that ethical dilemma front and center.
Yeah, and that community involvement part is fascinating. People form crowds, use social media, and sometimes effectively crowdsource evidence, which again shows the democratization of investigation tools.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like everyone becomes a mini investigator, from tech savvy citizens to amateur sleuths. They share information, reassemble digital footprints, and challenge the silence of under resourced official investigations.
Mm-hmm. And while that can lead to breakthroughs, it also creates the risk of misinformation. A delicate balance, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And one could argue that while this democratization is refreshing, it raises questions about privacy invasion and compromising due process, not to mention that it might even influence how judges and juries ultimately receive the evidence.
Right. And so the legal landscape becomes a minefield. I mean, when evidence collected via unconventional channels is thrown into the mix, it makes every stakeholder, from the victim's family to seasoned investigators, worry about legitimacy.
Exactly so. And beyond the legal aspects, there's the psychological pull of true crime, why people are so drawn to these narratives. The media's role in this particular case further amplifies the public's interest, but sometimes at the cost of creating sensationalism.
Exactly. And that sensationalism, while it might spur public engagement, can also lead to ethical issues and misinformed narratives that potentially sway public opinion before the full facts are understood.
Absolutely. And this convergence of independent investigation and official law enforcement might even pave the way for rethinking how we approach criminal investigation in this digital age. It's like the future of investigations is at a crossroads, blending cutting edge technology with grassroots detective work.
Hmm. It's a remarkably layered case that teaches us many lessons about evidence, legal integrity, public trust, and the ever important need for responsible media coverage. I'm really amazed at how the Maya Mallette case encapsulates all these themes.
For sure. It's a wake-up call, almost like um, urging both the institutions and the public to recalibrate their approaches for a more integrated and ethical investigation process. And that's what makes this case, in all its complexity, so compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a testament to how independent efforts can force a reevaluation of traditional systems. And while there are pitfalls and challenges, the collective push for truth is undeniably powerful.
Exactly. It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it's also a catalyst for change. I guess we'll be keeping an eye on how these trends evolve in the future, especially as more citizens turn into empowered investigators.
Indeed. Thanks for this deep dive into such a layered case. It really gives us plenty to think about in our modern investigative landscape.
No doubt it's a fascinating reflection of our times, where information, technology, and community involvement intersect in the pursuit of justice.
Well said. Let's see what lessons emerge next time we face similar complexities in criminal investigations.